This week on ANN, we're bringing you top stories from the 2017 Annual Council of the Church's Executive Committee.
The governing body votes to continue dialogue on the unity and reconciliation process.
And the Church's top statistician says membership is up, but challenges related to retention remain.
These stories and more coming up.
Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to explain what the Annual Council is all about.
Annual Council is one of two annual meetings of the Seventh-day Adventist World Church's Executive Committee. The meeting is usually held at the World Church headquarters in the U.S. state of Maryland in the month of October.
The Executive Committee is the second highest governing body of the denomination. It is second to the delegates of the General Conference in session, which takes place every 5 years.
The Executive Committee is comprised of officers from the World Headquarters, department directors, officers from the 13 World Territories, and other attached fields. Members also include union presidents and presidents of General Conference institutions.
The committee is also comprised of 3 lay members from each of the 13 World Territories and 1 pastor from each territory. It includes additionally 1 frontline employee for every 500,000 members and between 30 and 40 members at large.
During Annual Council, members of the committee, commonly referred to as delegates, vote on policies and reports that are necessary for the operation of the church.
The Seventh-day Adventist Church's second highest governing body voted on Tuesday to continue dialogue on the unity and reconciliation process. Following nearly 6 hours of discussion and debate, a majority of members of the Executive Committee voted to send a document entitled Procedures for Reconciliation and Adherence in Church Governance, Phase 2. They voted to send that back to the Unity in Mission Oversight Committee for further review. The document outlines the second phase of a process of reconciliation voted during last year's Annual Council. The process sought to initiate standard procedures for maintaining church unity in matters involving non-compliance. The Phase 2 document emphasizes the Executive Committee's commitment to, quote, preserve the governance and organizational structure of the Seventh-day Adventist Church on all levels. Its commitment would be in the context of a godly forbearance, Christian charity, and redemptive grace. The Phase 2 document that was referred back to the originating committee also makes an unapologetic case for the need of church policy, anchoring its roots in biblical references, along with principles articulated by church co-founder Ellen White. Visit news.adventist.org to read the full report from Tuesday's decision and to read the full document.
According to the lead historian and statistician of the Adventist Church, David Trim, membership is growing at an increased rate. Trim shared the church's most recent trends in his capacity as the director of church's Office of Archives, Statistics, and Research. He told the Executive Committee on Monday membership has grown to 20.3 million. This translates to 1 baptism every 23 seconds. He explained the increase includes the fact that the membership auditing process has slowed after several years of steady implementation in most regions of the world. But Trim also highlighted the church's troubling trend regarding membership retention. According to Trim, the church has lost 39%, or 2 of 5 new members. He told the Executive Committee, let me remind you that members do not usually leave because of theological differences, but because they go through a crisis in life or experience conflict in the church community. They might feel unmissed, uncared for, unimportant, and after a few years, they just slip through the cracks. Read more by visiting news.adventist.org.
The church's chief financial officer urged for members to return to systematic giving and to increase their support for stewardship ministries. Juan Prestal-Puesan told Executive Committee members the emphasis in stewardship has dwindled since the 1980s. Stewardship directors have faced many obstacles while trying to bring their territories to focus on systematic giving. Prestal praised the fervor of the stewardship group and championed their commitment to systematic giving. He appealed to church members to return their tithes and offerings faithfully. He said, the church doesn't depend on big project givers. It depends on the John Does and Mary Jones who sit in the pew and give faithfully of their tithe and offerings. They are making the journey of the church possible. That's who we are.
Presto also reported one of the biggest challenges the church has faced in the past few years is the strength of the U.S. dollar against other currencies. These currencies include the euro or Brazilian real. More than half of the church's income comes from outside the United States. The report also highlighted the budget for 2018, which included a 3.4% income reduction for 2018, or 5.7 million US dollars. It is partially offset by reduction of allocations of 2.1%, or $3.85 million. Historically, the budget is projected at the same amount of income from 2 years prior. The church has continued that practice for the 2018 budget with a few changes. This year, Treasury has calculated the amount to the local currencies instead of the US dollar. Several events have also impacted the 2018 budget. Last month, the North American division physically moved out of the world headquarters to their own office building. Another impact is the sale of the Review and Herald property in the U.S. state of Maryland. In addition, an action taken during this year's annual council treasurer's report was to divide money from certain offerings between two of the church's media outlets. Adventist World Radio has long been a recipient of offering and systematic giving, while the church's other media outlet, Hope Channel, has not. Members of the executive committee voted to evenly split the percentages previously allocated to Adventist World Radio. During his report, following Prestall, Ray Wallen, under-treasurer for the Adventist Church, said, "Despite the financial challenges we face, I'm grateful to the Lord for the financial resources the Lord has provided to us in advance. I firmly believe the Lord will give us every penny that we ever need to accomplish the assignments He gives to us in spreading the good news of His soon return."
Prior to the business meetings, members of the executive committee attended an annual professional development conference for the leaders of the denomination. The theme for this year's Leadership, Education, and Development, or LEAD conference, was Into the Cities. Heavy emphasis was placed on ministering in cities, since most of the world's population lives in urban settings. This year's conference was delivered by the various entities that function under Adventist mission. According to its director, Gary Krause, 91% of all church resources are spent on those already Christian. The aim of the conference was to encourage leaders to customize their methods of sharing biblical truths when ministering in areas where there's little or no Christian presence. Presentations were given by leaders of the church's 6 global mission centers. They shared the strategies, goals, and obstacles of their respective areas. The centers cover the following: East Asian religions, South Asian religions, Adventist Jewish relations, Adventist Muslim relations, and secular people. They are invaluable resources to help Adventists build bridges of understanding and friendship with people from major world religions and philosophies. Visit news.adventist.org to learn more about the LEAD conference and to see how Adventist Mission is using unique, practical methods to reach those who don't know Jesus.
According to the president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, members and leaders should avoid applying human ideas as we follow God's command to reach cities and adopt heavenly inspired methods instead.
Ted Wilson delivered those remarks as part of his annual Sabbath address to members of the World Church's Executive Committee on October 7. Wilson called on every member to focus efforts on reaching the large urban centers of the world.
Wilson said the method is a practical approach that strives to portray Christ's character to others.
He highlighted various examples, including community initiatives, health clinics, vegetarian restaurants, integrated media and social media evangelism, counseling centers, and personal witnessing with family and friends.
Wilson called on several church leaders throughout his sermon to share how they are applying some of these methods in cities around the world.
Wilson emphasized that reaching the big cities is a massive work and one that cannot be accomplished only by paid pastors.
He underscored the need for total member involvement, or TMI, in order to reach this goal. Wilson said, "I am personally asking that all fields emphasize this amazing TMI method. Let us revitalize our church members in every area of church mission."
Coming up, we're bringing you stories from the world church community.
But up next, an Adventist academy in the U.S. state of California is destroyed by wildfire.
My brother's unexpected death shocked me into changing my life. A friend of mine said, "Why don't you do a triathlon?" So I swam and rode and ran until I discovered life is more than just human strength. I race because my health matters. I believe because my faith matters. I'm Ed. I'm a Christian. I am an Ironman, and I've discovered my whole life matters.
And Adventist Academy is among the 1,500 structures that were destroyed this week due to wildfires in the U.S. state of California.
The fires in the state's northern region have burned more than 115,000 acres, killed 15 people, and injured more than 100.
Redwood Adventist Academy was burned to the ground on Tuesday when one of the fires went through the city of Santa Rosa. Fortunately, no one was injured.
Administrators closed the school Monday in response to evacuation orders.
Redwood Adventist Academy offers education from kindergarten to the 12th grade.
This story was still developing at the time of this recording. Visit facebook.com/Redwood Adventist Academy to stay up to date with the school's response.
The U.S. territory of Puerto Rico has been without power, food, and adequate supplies since Hurricane Maria debilitated the island nation. Many Adventist churches in San Juan and throughout the nation are doing their best to provide the little food and water they have to help members and those in their community. The president of the church's Inter-American Territory, or IAD, Israel Leto, visited the island October 1st through the 3rd. He brought satellite phones for church members and urgently needed supplies. Leto said, "Hope seems nearly gone. To see so much destruction, so many fallen trees, dead animals on the side of the road, long lines for everything, it just breaks your heart." The visit included stops to the church's two major institutions and encouraged church members displaced by the storm. According to Leto, Bella Vista Hospital is operating with its 3 generators, one of which has been failing. The IAD and the church's world headquarters have partnered to deliver special financial assistance to help keep the hospital running in the short term. Leto said Bella Vista has been providing services to the community for more than 60 years, and we must keep the institution going with enough support to continue its ministry of providing health care. During his visit to Antillean Adventist University, Leto witnessed one of the school's major issues, its insufficient amount of water. Leto said the church's Inter-American Territory is helping the university build a new well that can hold 50,000 gallons of water a day. The campus is currently operating with 30,000 gallons. If you'd like more information on how to assist with this territory, how to help with the relief efforts, send an email to adra@interamerica.org.
Adventists immediately responded to the aftermath of the deadly mass shooting that took place in Las Vegas Sunday, October 1st. The Paradise and Mountain View Adventist churches opened their doors to the community the following morning to offer prayer to affected community members. Pastors and several members with counseling training visited hospitals where many of the 500 people who were injured were receiving care. According to the church's Nevada-Utah territory, their ministry was well received, but leaders considered it a small contribution in light of such overwhelming need. Peter Neri, senior pastor of Paradise Church, said, "We weren't ready for this kind of disaster. We could be doing so much more." Church leaders in the territory kicked off initial discussions on how local pastors and leaders can be better prepared for crisis and disaster response. Members also made blood donations and took 80 sandwiches to feed police and first responders.
As we've previously reported, the Adventist Development and Relief Agency in Bangladesh is serving Rohingya who have fled their homes in Myanmar due to persecution. The Rohingya are a stateless Indo-Aryan ethnic body and considered to be the world's most persecuted people. A violent outbreak on August 25 led to the exodus of more than 436,000 people in 1 month alone. So far, the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar has affected more than 1.2 million people. ADRA Bangladesh is carrying out humanitarian efforts in the nation's Cox's Bazar and Lida Rohingya refugee camps. ADRA is also simultaneously helping the country recover from its worst flooding that it's experienced in 40 years. ADRA distributed food packages this week to 1,400 families. The packages include lentils, sugar, salt, and oil, which complement rice that is given in partnership with World Food Program. On Monday, another food distribution benefited approximately 24,000 people in the nation's northwestern region that was devastated by floods. And finally, for the news this week, Hope Channel is getting ready to launch a new series that explores Jesus in a different way through two unique perspectives.
Revolutionary is a 10-part series that includes 2 sets.
The first takes place in Israel. It follows Oleg Kostyuk as he brings Jesus' first-century world to life.
The second set takes place in New York, where Sergio Gonzalez explores how this first-century man could still be relevant to us in the 21st century.
These two journeys intertwine to form one story filled with ancient discoveries and modern connections.
Revolutionary creates a new and dynamic picture of Jesus that speaks directly to us today.
Coming up, we're getting ready to launch a series about personal heroes. Stay tuned to see how you can help.
But up next, learn about a dynamic young adult man of God who launched the ministry of one of Scotland's most notable reformers.
Peter and John were called in by the chief priests and elders about their preaching. They tried to defend their actions, but the leaders were very hard on them. They were commanded not to speak or teach in the name of Jesus. After further threats, they let them go. Peter and John went back to their own people and reported all that the chief priests and elders had said.
When we heard all this, we immediately raised our voices in prayer to God. The entire group prayed for Peter and John. We prayed for God to give boldness to these two humble servants. Such intense prayer I had not experienced for a long time. After we had prayed, suddenly, the whole place was shaken.
People were filled with the Holy Spirit, and Peter and John went out and gave witness with great power and grace. They witnessed throughout the land about the resurrection of their Savior.
Welcome back.
The Archbishop of Scotland made several attempts to track him throughout the nation, but he would find ways to evade the malicious schemes.
George Wishart was 25 years old when he began teaching biblical truths in Scotland and became a labeled enemy of the state. But he remained fearless and faithful throughout his ministry, which would ultimately end his life.
For this week's Of Lineage, we're going to learn about the impact of George Wishart, also known as Scotland's forgotten forerunner.
St. Andrews today is famous for 2 things. Number 1, it's the home of golf. And number 2, it's the town where Prince William met Kate whilst he was studying at university. But it's the spiritual history of this town that is most interesting and significant. St. Andrews was the town in the 1500s where the first Protestant Scottish martyr was burned for his faith. His name was Patrick Hamilton, and he is remembered by a spot with his initials on the ground. But we fast forward to the year 1538 when Cardinal David Beaton took over and made it his mission to catch a reformer by the name of George Wishart and stamp out what he saw as the growing heresy in Scotland. At the time, George was only a young man, 25 years old, and he stayed one step ahead of the cardinal and escaped and went to Cambridge University, where he met with Hugh Latimer, and together they went on to Bristol. He was only there for about 6 months when he got into trouble again and had to flee the city. He went to Switzerland, where he spent 3 years traveling to various cities, including Geneva and Zurich, and he had the chance to meet with John Calvin and Bullinger, where he was able to study and crystallize his views on the gospel. In 1542, he returned to the British Isles and went to Cambridge, where he taught at the university. After teaching for 1 year, he then returned to Scotland, where he began to preach the gospel in cities around the country. He went to Montrose to teach the Book of Romans, and then he went to Dundee. Beaton followed him there, but Wishart hid from him. Then he went to Perth to preach, and then to Ayr. The Archbishop followed him, but he could not catch him. He then went back to Dundee, and a priest by the name of John Whiten was sent to kill him, but the crowd turned against him. George Wishart was much loved by his countrymen, as he didn't just preach, but had a very practical side to his ministry. In one instance in the city of Dundee, when the plague broke out, most people fled the city, but George Wishart went into the city so he could care for the sick and the suffering. Towards the end of his life, he met John Knox, who was a young man at the time and would go on to be a great leader in his own right in the Scottish Reformation. He started out essentially as a bodyguard for George Wishart, carrying a two-handed sword with him as he traveled around the country. They built a strong bond as teacher and student until finally Cardinal Beaton, with 500 soldiers, captured George Wishart. John Knox wanted to follow George into captivity, but was told to stay with the words, "One is sufficient for sacrifice." He was brought here to the castle and put here in this sea tower where he was imprisoned. He was then tried, and as he was tried, he answered all his accusations from the Bible. They were not satisfied, and he was condemned to death. Outside the castle walls, the initials GW are imprinted on the ground, marking the exact spot where George Wishart gave his life at the young age of 33. Two things we learn from this man. Number one, in his ministry and life, he was incredibly faithful and was ministering to the sick and suffering as he traveled around the country. Number two, we learn about the power and importance of preaching. How in 2 years, as he traveled around the country, he caused great revival, making a lasting change and impression here in this country. The thing that stands out to me the most, though, is how young he was, that he died at the age of 33. He was a teacher at Cambridge at the age of 29. He gave his youth to God, and God used him in a powerful way. God is calling for young people again today, young people who will give their talents and their gifts to Him and allow themselves to be used in a powerful way.
Can't get enough of this series? Visit lineagejourney.com to watch more episodes.
For this week's social media segment, ANN's producer Jennifer Steimus shares how you can help us tell stories of people who've made profound impacts in your lives.
As you've seen in today's episode with the stories of refugees in Bangladesh and fires in California, or in the past few episodes of ANN Video, earthquakes in Mexico, hurricanes in the U.S. and Inter-America region, and a mass shooting in Las Vegas, it seems like the world is falling apart. Even worse, the people we expect to help us are often the people making the situation worse. One of our favorite parts of producing ANN Video is hearing your stories of heroism, stories of everyday people going out into their communities to make a difference. Like the man in Houston who took his flat-bottom canoe out to rescue people after Hurricane Harvey, or the woman who inspired this segment, Lorena, who, when she was diagnosed with cancer, spent the last months of her life volunteering in a refugee clinic in Iraq. But we want to hear more stories. Who has inspired you? Who has made a difference in your life? Who is your hero? We want you to send us their picture and write a little bit about how they've impacted your life. You can send them to us on Facebook at facebook.com/Adventist News Network, or you can email us at anmvideo11@gmail.com. We plan on sharing these stories on our Facebook page and sometimes here on A&M Video. We want to make your heroes our heroes. We look forward to hearing your stories. God bless.
And finally, for today's program, let's turn to David Trim for a look at Adventist history.
This week, learn about the origins of Adventist schools in the Philippines, Lebanon, and Wisconsin.
This week in Adventist history is notable for significant dates in Adventist schools around the world. On October 11, 1985, the Central Philippine Adventist School became Central Philippine Adventist College. Located in Murcia in the province of Negros Occidental, the college currently has approximately 800 students. Originally, Central Philippine College only offered a bachelor's degree in agriculture, but other programs have been added and students now study for degrees in business, nursing, education, agriculture, and theology. On October 12, 1956, an Adventist mission school opened in Lebanon to the east of the capital, Beirut. It had its origins in the education department of Middle East College, which established a small school where teacher training students could do practical courses. But soon, the small school was upgraded to a high school, and in 1969 it moved to its present location on a spacious campus in Bushria, then on the eastern outskirts of Beirut, but today part of the Lebanese capital's sprawling suburbs. Today, Bushria Adventist Secondary School has just over 100 students. On October 13, in the middle of World War II, the Wisconsin Conference purchased 540 acres for a new school site. This was the vision of then conference president T. Edgar Unruh, who hoped to merge the conference's two high schools, Bethel Academy and Highlandale Academy. Highlandale closed in 1942 and Bethel in 1949, with the newly named Wisconsin Academy opening on a new site near Columbus, Wisconsin. We say a big hello to the staff and students there, since we know the social studies class often watches This Week in Adventist History. And that was this week, a scholarly week in Seventh-day Adventist history.
Thanks for watching A&N. Join us next week for more news from the headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
We'd love to hear from you. Send us your feedback and tell us how your church is making a difference in its community.
Be sure to capture plenty of video footage and photos, then write up a summary of the event's important details. And feel free to send full video reports as well.
You can reach us by sending an email to annvideo11@gmail.com.
Before we say goodbye, here's some good news from the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6.
The passage says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do, and He will show you which path to take."
That's our program for this week. And remember, you can always visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.